right, we are back. The 14 Apostles study over the summer here. We are on the website again. I said it was going to be something week 1 because I was in the process of setting this up and it wouldn't let me do it. So this is the actual one. So if you're watching on YouTube, it will have this in the comments. If you're on my website, you'll be here at this location. I'm in the process of downloading the first 2 videos from YouTube, and then I put the copies on my website. So that way there's multiple places to find it and get to it. If you'll remember, week 1, we covered we set the stage, right? We set the stage for where, when, how, why, and then we're talking about the who's now as we're going through these weeks. Last week was Andrew and Peter, the brothers, and I kind of opined that I think Peter was probably the older brother, Andrew was the younger one. I think Andrew has a heart for evangelism, is probably a wiser guy as far as spiritual things, but I feel like Peter is so passionate, so we talked about Andrew and Peter last week. This week, we're going to talk about the sons of thunder, which is the Zebedee boys. And Zebedee would be not their last name, but that's the name of their father, Zebedee. And we're talking about James and John. Okay? Now, this is the very same John who wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. The Revelator. He's one of the sons of thunder. So that we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about that here.
Now, is this the James kin to?
James is brother of John, and he was involved much more in the ministry. So he's called James the Greater. It doesn't mean that he's like better. Like he's not like the Pope and this guy's, mince meat or whatever if you're into the Pope. But it just means he is more, like we talk about major prophets and minor prophets in the Old Testament. The major prophets are major because Isaiah's book is this long and Jonah's book is this long. He's a minor prophet. And that's all it means. So James the Greater is the brother of John.
Is it little John or big
Big
John?
bad John.
John. Now there is another John that's mentioned, and his name is John, also called Mark. John Mark. His name is John Mark. We've referred to him as Mark for simplicity's sake.
The doctor. Oh, no. Luke.
Luke's the physician, the doctor, yeah. So we're talking about Matthew, Mark,
Okay.
Luke, John, Mark. So John Mark is his full name.
Is that the same guy who traveled with Paul?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah. But we stopped calling him John for simplicity's sake.
I got you.
Because there was another John, who we mentioned last week, who was the cousin of Jesus, John the Baptist.
Right.
So you could go John. It's like in our group, it's like Chris, right? We got all these Chris's in our group. So that's why we have Big Chris and Bradford and Harvey and whatever. Okay. So you kind of make the difference. So we're saying in this case, Big Chris is bigger. He's going to just break down the door because he couldn't get through the door. So James the Greater here is not because he was necessarily larger, and it was not necessarily that he was more of a spiritual powerhouse or anything like that. That's not necessarily what we're saying. We're simply saying there's more about James the Greater than there is James the Lesser. James the Lesser is Jesus' half-brother. He is the son of Mary and Joseph. Jesus is the son of Mary and the Holy Spirit. So they're actually half-brother. They got the same mama. Different fathers.
James was Peter's partner.
And James is Peter's partner.
He was vengeful and fiery, selfish and conceited. I got Bible scriptures to back this up.
Yeah, and we're going to pull up some of those. So as you're saying that, I'm saying, yep, check. I've got some of them marked out here.
He's the first bishop to Spain, so he went on to Spain to his missionary work.
For a while.
So he's the first
Yep.
bishop of Spain, is what it says.
According to the Catholic tradition.
Well, they claim a lot of people.
They do claim a lot of people. And we're going to talk about that too. We're going to go into Acts just a little bit here. So if Jesus was born, it was like 3 or 4 BC, and he lived to be 33 years old. That means that he was killed in about 30 AD. Is the math making sense here? 30 AD, or Common Era. We talked about that week 1. Common Era is AD. Before Common Era is BC. And James, I guess we're going to go forward to the end, and then we'll go back to the beginning. But there is tradition. Let me pull this scripture here. In Acts chapter 12. Let's just, if you're going to flip in your Bible, flip to Acts chapter 12. And it says, in the year 44 AD, so this is 14 years after Jesus. So what happened 14 years ago here? I mean, 14 years ago was what? 8. So we had a recession. We had, yeah, Ike came through here. Like we can think about, we lived through this. It wasn't that crazy long ago. I mean, right? I mean, I think about 9/11, and I'm like, well, that's already 21 years ago, you know? But we all knew where we were, et cetera, et cetera. So 15, 20 years is nothing, right? So 44 AD, 14 years after Jesus, in Acts chapter 12, verse 1, about the time King Herod extended his hands, not the same King Herod who killed the babies in Bethlehem, but his son, right? Herod Agrippa, extended his hands to harm certain ones from the church, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Seeing that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to further arrest Peter also. And this happened during the days of unleavened bread. Now we know the days of unleavened bread coincides with the week of Passover, Easter, right? The resurrection, so they're celebrating Jesus. And if you'll remember, they also celebrated a tradition during the Passover week, Feast of Unleavened Bread. They had a prisoner, and the tradition was, I'm going to bring you a prisoner, and I'm going to bring you another prisoner, and you're going to tell me which one, I'll let one of them go. So, now that you remember that, remember Barabbas? Give us Barabbas.
So how do we know the date on this?
Because the context from outside the scripture. Whenever King Herod decreed this, it was written in his royal records.
Okay.
So that's what we call an extra biblical source. Okay. So I'm tying them together.
Sure.
So in an extra biblical source, 44 AD, King Herod extended his hands to harm certain ones from the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. I'm guessing he may have beheaded him. It doesn't specifically say that. It just says with the sword. I mean, he may have just jabbed him and he was done. Seeing that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to further arrest Peter also. And this happened during the days of unleavened bread. So we have that week in our mind, right? When he had seized him, he put him in prison and handed him over to the 4 squads of soldiers to guard him. 4 squads, not 4 soldiers, but 4 squads. They didn't want these radical Christians, these little Jesus followers, to come break him out of prison, okay? And intending to bring him before the people after the Passover. After the Passover. So King Herod here is not intending to use Peter as the same thing where he's saying, do you want Peter or do you want this criminal? He was saying, I'm not even bringing that up. I'm not even doing that thing. Is that making sense now what I'm saying? Okay. Now it doesn't say that in the text, but you've got to connect the dots, right? We've got to go back and look at our history. In verse 5, so Peter was kept in prison, but the church prayed to God without ceasing for him. And since we talked about Peter last week, I said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and continue the rest of this little story here. The very night when Herod would have brought him out, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and the guards before the door were securing the prison. So they're locking up shop. And suddenly an angel of the Lord approached him, and light shone in the prison. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, rise up quickly, and the chains fell off his hands. How would you like to be woken up? Like, you're thinking it's one of the guards, hitting you, elbowing you in the side, and you're like, what? Angel, what is happening? Right? I mean, it's crazy. Verse 8, then the angel said to him, dress yourself and put your sandals on. And he did so. Then he said to him, wrap your cloak around you and follow me. He went out and followed him and did not know what was done by the angel if it was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. When they had passed the first and the second guard, they came to the iron gate leading to the city, which opened to them by itself. I mean, This is like reading C.S. Lewis when we're talking about The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe or something. Fantastical, right?
This is the earthquake.
This one doesn't say earthquake. This just says it just opened by itself.
That was one with Paul. Barnabas.
This is in Jerusalem. He's in this prison. This is not the prison where he was in Ephesus, I think, where the earthquake happened. And they went out and went forward one street, and immediately the angel left him. So he was like, all right, here we go. And so they started going, and they got, past this street, and they got to this street, and the angel was gone. And now Peter's like, well, now you broke me out. What do I do now? And you left. So we see here, verse 11. When Peter had come to himself, because he was just trying to wrap his mind around what had just happened, when he came to himself, he said, now I certainly know that the Lord has sent his angel and delivered me from the hand of Herod, from all that the Jewish people were expecting. They were expecting him to also be executed. Okay? That's effectively what was happening. So, realizing this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John. So,
John Mark, I see.
Yep. Whose other name was Mark. So not this John, but John Mark. Now, my brother-in-law's name is actually John Mark. John-Mark. And we call him John, but his full name, when he puts it on his ID, is John-Mark. John Mark. Okay? Where many were gathered together praying. Now, why would they be gathered together praying again?
Well, I guess that's what they did.
Not,
Because he was in prison. They were
Yeah,
trying to get him out.
but they were all gathered together. Remember, they had split and they had gone different places, but they were gathered.
Oh, the feast of the...
Aha! They were in town for Passover.
So that was a bustling crowd.
Yes.
Easy to get lost.
So this is what I love, guys, is like you pay attention to those little details, right? And then you remember, like,
I've read that, but I've read this
yeah.
before. I've never seen John Mark, and what you
John Mark.
just let us know that. I just,
You have read it, but you don't.
yeah,
Pass it
that's
over.
why I love.
So where many were gathered together praying. Many? Well, like, it wasn't just the 10 or 11 of them. Like, there was many of them there, okay? And it's because they were in town for the unleavened bread and the Passover festival, okay? As Peter knocked at the door of the porch. This is one of my favorite passages of the New Testament. Not because it's theologically deep and rich, but because I think it's funny, and I love the comedy in the Bible, okay? As Peter knocked at the door of the porch, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, that sounds like Peter, right? From joy, she did not open the door, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing at the door. So,
They thought it was a ghost.
hey, it's me. Hey, guys, Peter's here. And he's still standing outside. He's still standing outside. I think it's hilarious. They said to her, you're insane.
With guards after him. Right?
Yeah, with guards after him and stuff. And that's what they said to her. You're insane. Like, he's in prison. He's got 4 squads of guards on him. He's in chains. You're hearing things. Go to bed, girl. But she insisted that it was really so. So they said, it is his angel, thinking that he had been killed and that his soul or spirit had been, which is not theologically sound, but they were superstitious. We talked about that, remember? When they were Jesus was walking across the water, they weren't like, oh, look, Jesus is walking on the water. What was the thing they said? Ghost! Right? Okay. But Peter continued knocking. Guys! Let me in!
She must have shut the door behind her.
She never opened the door. She just heard.
Oh, okay. I would have came in.
Because they don't have solid doors like we have our solid doors. Remember, it's planks of wood with like gaps and stuff. So she was like, that sounds like Peter. Like, guys, Peter's here. And then they're like, you're insane. That must have been his ghost. Peter continued to knock. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're looking at the girl like, you weren't crazy. Motioning to them with his hand to be quiet. Guys, like, I can see, Peter! Like, guards after. Just chill out, right? Cops are outside. Motioning to them with his hand to be quiet, he described to them how the Lord had led them out of the prison. And he said, go tell these things to James and to the brothers. Then he departed and went to another place. Wait, what? I'm going to read that again. He says, "Shh, guys, quiet. This is how the Lord let me out of prison. Go tell these things to James and to the brothers." And then he left and went to another place. We don't even know where he went, and he left. Do you think he was concerned about his well-being and his safety?
And the people he was with, I'm sure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they've become accomplices. Oh,
Right.
you did this.
Right. Yeah. So he was like, "I'm out. I'm going." And now when day came, there was a great disturbance among the soldiers about what had become of Peter when Herod had searched for him and did not find him, and he examined the guards and commanded that they should be put to death. Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. Now, if you remember, we talked about this a little bit before in geography. So Jerusalem's kind of here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to draw it because
You like to draw.
I like to draw.
You know what I need to bring up here is my biblical map, because it made it fit on the.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So you remember I did this in the Exodus study. There's the Mediterranean, and then here's the Nile River Delta, right? We got the little Nile River Delta. We've got the Dead Sea kind of here. We got the Jordan River, and we got the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. You tracking? Pretty simple map. Jerusalem is right about here. Tyre and Sidon, those places are way up here on the shoreline, along with the place called Caesarea. There's Caesarea Philippi, and there's Caesarea Augustine or something like that. And it's on the shore, and it's got a Colosseum that's now out in the Mediterranean Ocean and all that stuff. But it's up here on this upper coast. Okay, so let's go back to the scriptures here. We're at the end of verse 19. It says, "Then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there." Down from Judea to Caesarea. Now, how does that make sense? He went down.
Maybe there's a mountain there, one down.
If you remember our geology that we did in week 1, Jerusalem sits up here. And you have the plains going down to the Mediterranean Ocean, and then you've got the mountains going down to the Jordan River Valley. So when it says that he went down, he literally went down the mountain to the shore. So those are the small little details that you just read, like, oh, he just went on down there. But like, he literally went down, and they put it in the scriptures. When you corroborate those things, you know? Now Herod, I'm just going to continue because this is such a great story. All right? I like Acts chapter 12. It's great. Now Herod was very angry. This is not James and John right now. We've kind of gone off track. We're adding Peter again. There's a lot of stuff about Peter, though. Now Herod was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, which is over here. But they came to him in unity, and having made Blastus, the king's personal servant, their friend, they asked for peace because their country was fed by the king's country. So they were saying, hey, we've got this guy. He's kind of taking care of us now. And so we really would like to see, can you just kind of join in with Blastus, because he was really king down here. He wasn't really king up there. He was just, that's like going to the vacation land, effectively. So verse 21, on an appointed day, Herod dressed in royal apparel, which was probably what? Purple or blue, right? And it was from those little mollusk snail things that are found in Israel there. Sat on his throne and gave a public speech to them. And the mob shouted, "It is the voice of a god."
Yeah.
They're trying to butter him up, right? It's the voice of a god and not of a man. Like, stroking his ego. Well, what does God think about that? Look at verse 23. Immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and died.
Oh, man.
Just so nonchalant. To the point.
Yeah. Like, God wasn't real happy about him, trying to claim to be this great guy up here when he was doing these atrocities down here. God just wasn't playing those games.
And that was the king's servant?
Yeah. And the word of God spread and increased. Verse 24, right? In verse 25, when Barnabas and Saul had fulfilled their ministry, they returned from Jerusalem and took with them John, whose surname was Mark. So we see here Barnabas and Saul, also called Paul, right? And then we see they join Mark in their midst. Okay, so that's Acts chapter 12. I like Acts chapter 12. I think it's a cool look into kind of these guys after Jesus, but before they kind of are killed or die, right? And on a side note, the idea we don't have 100%. There is an apocryphal book. It's the Gospel of the Acts of John, and we have like little scraps of it here and there. We don't know how much of it is like. It's not in our Bible for a reason. Okay, that doesn't mean that there's not anything true in it either. It's just we don't have enough to make a decision one way or another. And so Tertullian, the writer Tertullian in the early Catholic Church, he's the one who claimed, even though it's not in those scraps, he's the one who made the claim that John, the son of thunder, that he was punished, he was sentenced to being boiled to death in oil. To put in a big cauldron, fill it with oil, get it boiling.
Is that on Patmos?
No, it was not on Patmos. It was in Rome. And he apparently went in and survived without a blister on his body, without his skin being affected at all. Again, there's nothing in the Bible that says that, and there's nothing outside the Bible that specifically has this story. There's just like little whispers of things here and there. But
I don't know if that was the author. To be canonized, you have to be able to prove it's the original author.
Correct.
Right, and they couldn't do it on this. But
Right.
like you said, it's still interesting.
It's very interesting.
Another account says because every time they tried to light the fire, the wind would stir and would blow the fire out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's all sorts of those things.
God uses natural resources for miracles.
Yeah, of course. And that would have been in 81 AD.
And he died at 100 AD.
And he died at 100. We believe that Revelation was written in about 98.
In prison. He was in prison.
He was on Patmos. So they had an island. It was like Alcatraz, basically.
You still go to my friends. Visited there 3 months ago.
Oh, wow. The ones that were in Egypt?
Yes, they went to
nice.
Patmos Island.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So Patmos Island was like, here's where the prisoners go. We're going to make them work, give them very little tools, make them figure out how to make stuff happen, and barely keep them alive, basically. It was like Alcatraz on steroids, to use that.
Steroids.
Or no steroids. The people weren't on steroids. The island was.
There we go.
This is a kind of, I don't know if this version says it, but I think you had referred to Barnabas and Saul. Why doesn't it say Paul since his name already had changed? This is a totally off the subject.
Yes, so that's a whole different topic. We're going to get to that when we cover Saul. We're going to cover him later because he's one of the 14. He says, I am a apostle come lately. I came after everybody. And then the 13th one is Matthias. So Judas Iscariot hangs himself.
Yeah.
And they said, well, Jesus chose 12, so we need to have 12. There's only 11 of us, so how are we going to, what you? Are you? And how are we, you? What are we going to do? And they said, well, we're going to cast lots.
There was actually 120 that Matthias had to.
Correct. Yeah, there was a whole troop that was in there. And so they said, well, we'll just let God decide. So they rolled the dice, basically, and it was you or you. And it had to be somebody who was there since the beginning, who had been, exposed to the teachings of Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. And it was Matthias. And so they were like, okay, you're in. Not that you're out, like you're still hanging out with us, but just the dice went to you. So we're going to choose you, Because Jesus, we don't know why Jesus chose. I wasn't worthy of being called.
Yeah.
Why did he choose me? So we just roll the dice and.
Yeah, I got it.
And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be still helping in the ministry and whatever, just right. So
a lot of churches choose their preachers like that.
I feel like that's true. Yeah.
It's true. By casting a lot or something like that, and then sometimes you end up with really good ones, and other times you end up with
But I think that's just what you're going to get when you get humans involved anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I know of a church not far away that actually had it was like about a 7-year deal, and they were like, don't preach these things. That's not our foundational, like, you read the foundational beliefs of our church. This is that, we don't go that direction.
There's an Ecclesiastes that goes over the proper, I hate saying politics, but like elders of the church, unique position, it's supposed to be voted on. The elders are supposed to be voted in. The congregation is supposed to vote.
Yeah.
So that keeps favoritism.
So Paul writes about that in Galatians, I think, and he says this is the qualifications for an overseer. Yeah. Here's what these people should look like. It doesn't mean perfect. It just means here's the people that this should look like. And then, like, we had elders here at our church, and they said, hey, these two guys have been brought forth. We feel like they're qualified. What we want to do is now open it up for the next month, that if you have any concerns that you need to bring to our attention that we're not aware of, or if you need to get to know them and ask questions, this is what the next month's about. And then at that end of that time, if nothing is brought that needs to be dealt with, then we'll just ordain and pray over them and make them elders of our church. So,
I was asked like a year and a half ago, not to become an elder, but if I wanted to work in that direction, and I had to be honest, no.
Yeah.
I'm not.
It's a great responsibility.
I'm not there yet. I can't. You got to be able to coach yourself before you can coach somebody else.
And like even me, I had someone, one of our elders was like, well, we're in a small church, we don't need any more elders. But obviously, if we needed more, like, you'd just be a shoe-in deal. And I'm like, no, it's not like I've been here long enough situation. That's not just like seniority where you don't just get kicked in. Like, I got to be called to that because it doesn't affect just me. It affects my family. It affects my kids, my wife. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, yeah, cool. I get, kudos, but you got to look beyond just that first couple of months of getting the kudos to like real ministry where you're getting calls in the middle of the night. Or it's a big deal. So anyway, we kind of digress there, but it's good conversation. Which leads me to Matthew chapter 5. I'm sorry, Matthew chapter 4. My bad. 5's on this page. Matthew chapter 4. Let's turn there real quick. And I'm in verse 18. And so we're going to kind of overlap a little bit with Andrew and Peter for a reason. And we'll talk about that right now. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, throwing a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, follow me, I will make you fishers of men. And they immediately left their nets to follow him. Remember, we talked about that last week, right? Okay. Continuing, and going on from there, going on from where? From the shore, where the fishermen were, where the boats were. Going on from there, just walking down the shore, he saw two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in a boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets, and he called them. And they immediately left the boat and their father and followed him. Okay? So, let's flip over to, I don't want to go to that yet. Let's go to, that's later. Let's go to Luke chapter 5.
James' mom is Salome.
Yes. The mother of Mary. So Jesus is actually is cousins to James and John. When you do the genealogy, he is cousins to James and John.
Okay. So he picked his cousins, huh? Picked his favorites.
Remember, I talked about that there was probably 1,500 to 2,500 people in this town. So you got limited options. You go with what you, and there's a reason. Obviously, he chose them.
Sure.
Now, let me ask you. Let me flip that narrative on you. Do you have any cousins?
Yes.
Hey, what's one first name of a cousin that you can think of?
Glenn.
So if Glenn said, "Hey, Gary, I'm the Messiah. Come follow me," what would you do? What would you do? You'd be like, Glenn, are you, like taking the wacky tobacco or what's going on here, man? Like, what am I doing? Like, I know, like, I've seen you were dirty in diapers together with me. What are you talking about? So, those guys had to see something different in Jesus. Right?
Well, in his own hometown, but it's like they were closer to him than anybody.
Yeah.
His family, So if they followed him, obviously they saw something.
They saw something. And we really don't know a lot between age 12 and age 30 of Jesus. Those 18 years are kind of missing.
It's more of a testament to who he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So let's go to Luke chapter 5, and let's start in verse 8. When Simon Peter saw it, the great number of fish tearing the nets, that whole thing, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." He realized something very important was happening here, and it wasn't a gigantic catch in the net. We talked about that last week, right? For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish which they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. So now we have Jesus walking over to potentially a pretty lucrative fishing business, as Chris called out. They got skunked, no fish, nothing. Jesus says, and we talked about this, Andrew is already spiritually ahead of these guys. So he's like, "Oh yeah, dude, that's a Messiah. That guy on the shore right there, that's him. Hey, Jesus. Hey, man. Hey, how you doing, buddy?" It's like, "Hey, did you catch anything, Peter?" He's like, "No." Try the other side. "I'm a professional fisherman. What are you trying to tell me?" Just try the other side. Boom. And that's when he was like, "Oh no, this is something different. This is completely something different." And James and John were there too. They're business partners. So you see James, John, Andrew, Peter. They leave Dad Zebedee behind with the workers on the boats. How many you have? 9 partners, you said, in your company?
My main company, I have 2.
2, but y'all have
Other companies, I would have a total of 6.
6. 6 partners. 6 partners. If 4 of them got up and walked out and said, "We're out," what would you do?
Depending on which 4.
Random 4. Random 4 got up and walked out and said, "I'm out." You might ask yourself, where are you going and why and what's happening here, right? So the ripple effect, they may have had an encounter with Jesus. Zebedee may not have had that encounter, but it's also a ripple effect. It starts affecting him and his family and his business and all the workers that are like, "Whoa, wait a second here. What's this Jesus guy doing? He's disrupting the status quo."
Well, that full net also did many things. It put money in their pocket also.
Right, yeah.
That they took home to the family.
Absolutely. Absolutely it did. So let's flip over here to Luke chapter 9 and go on down to verse 49. Luke 9:49. Actually, go back up to 46. This starts Luke 9:46 all the way down to Luke 9:56. So this 46 to 56, these 10 verses here is a window into James and John. Let's peek in the window for just a minute, okay? I'm gonna read this. I want you to read this carefully. Let's look at the details, right? A dispute arose among them as to which of them was the greatest.
You see that?
You got 12 guys walking with a rabbi, and they're like, "Well, I was closest. I broke more bread in that basket than you did, and you didn't." Oh man, kind of the measuring up situation here. You know what I'm talking about? So a dispute arose among them as to which one was the greatest. Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, took a child and put it by him, and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all will be great." You think that kind of either shut them up
Well, it gets you thinking.
or kind of pissed them off, right? We're not talking about kids. We know, okay, right, yeah, like you're not going to do anything to a kid, but we're talking about us, Jesus. Like, we're the 12.
You know, Jesus spoke like a philosopher.
He did.
Really had to think.
Yeah.
It was so deep.
And he said, treat it like the little ones, right? Like, that's the least, and that would tell you who's the greatest one. And you could almost see them either doing one or the other. At least that's the way I would react to it. And there may be a third option, I don't know, okay? Or it's like, yeah, Chris, you hear what he said? Right? That may be the third option.
Yeah.
So let's go to verse 49. John answered, right? James and John today. John answered, "Master, we saw a man casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he does not follow with us. He's not cool enough.
Not in our circle.
He ain't in our circle." A little bit of arrogance, a little bit of hot-headedness.
No, okay, John's saying this, right?
John is saying that. Okay? And Jesus said, "Do not forbid him, for he who is not against you is for you." I can almost see Jesus, like you said, that philosopher talk, but it's almost like, if he accidentally cast out a demon, why is that a bad thing?
Exactly.
And John's like, yeah, but he ain't on our team, man.
He's not in our gang.
He ain't in our gang.
Or our colors.
He's got the blue on, man. We're the red, man. You know what I'm talking about? Verse 51. When the time came for him to be received up, he was steadfastly set to go to Jerusalem. In some texts it says his face was set as a flint toward Jerusalem. Do you remember what flint was used for? Knives, arrowheads. All right? So that means very sharp.
Start fire with
It means I ain't turning to the left or to the right. Because if you start dragging a knife blade across here, unless I turn it, it ain't changing its direction. It's cutting through this stuff, right? So if his face is like a flint set towards Jerusalem, he ain't turning. Okay? The time has come for me to go up. And why is he going up from here to here? Because he was down here and he was going up to Jerusalem.
He's going back.
Going back. When the time came for him to be received up, he was steadfastly set to go to Jerusalem and sent messengers ahead of him. They went and entered a village of the Samaritans. Remember earlier, the woman at the well? That was in the Samaritan village. So it wasn't like out of the realm of possibility for them to go to the Samaritans anymore. There was precedent there. It wasn't like some random weird thing. Like, okay, well, he wants to go from here back towards Jerusalem, so we're going to pass through Samaria. Okay, we'll stop it. We'll do a little bit of ministry work in Samaria. Throw a bone for the poor people in Samaria or whatever. And to make things ready for him. But they did not receive him because he was set to go to Jerusalem. So the people in Samaria were like, yeah, we're not really interested in talking to this Jesus character.
Didn't they worship in a different city or something?
They did.
So like that was out. This was in, right?
Right. And so they were like, we're not really interested in talking to this Jesus character. That was ordained because his face was set to Jerusalem, not to be distracted over here. So they were basically obeying what Jesus was asking. Okay? When his disciples, James and John, saw this, "You reject our rabbi? Do you even know who this guy is? Do you even know the miracles that we've seen him do?" I tell you what. Let's go to verse 54. When his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elijah did? We're going to burn them up. They're not going to reject you like that, Jesus. We're team the apostles." Right? But he turned and rebuked. I can see Jesus going, "Guys, seriously? Burn them up?" I mean, But he turned and said and rebuked them and said, "You don't know what kind of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them." That's a reference to John 3, 17 and 16, 17, and 18. Okay, so there's a connection there. And I didn't come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. But Jesus had to talk them off the ledge. They were ready to just, you're talking, you know,
They were vengeful.
Jesus, fire, artillery right now, boom, let me see it. And this is why Jesus called them the sons of thunder, because they got rumbly.
You know, it says here, these are kind of cool, these little side notes about John.
Yeah, lay it on us.
Yeah, because, you know, a lot of us think that the disciples had to be perfect, or we have to be perfect. Listen to this. John, vengeful and fiery.
Yep.
Judgmental.
Yep.
Selfish.
Yep.
Bold, loving, and compassionate after the Pentecost. Now listen, here's what's crazy. John's brother James, same thing. These brothers were like, both personalities were like. James was vengeful and fiery, Luke 9:54. Selfish and conceited. I mean, this is James. But you don't have to be perfect, man. You know?
He didn't call the perfect. He calls people to sanctify them.
They had problems.
But this Sunday.
Just like we do.
Yeah.
But we can use anybody.
He qualifies the people he calls. He doesn't call the qualified. These are real people. This is the guy living next door.
But I like seeing the negative.
This is the guy with the hot head who, you know, is drinking wine in his garage and yelling and screaming. Yeah. And Jesus said, "I'm looking past all that. I can still work with you. I can still work with you." I accidentally skipped this. This is back in Matthew chapter 4, if you're interested. Matthew 4:21. It says, "And going from there, from Andrew and Peter along the shore, he saw two other brothers, James and the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets, and he called them. They immediately left their boat and their father and followed him." Oh wait, I read that. Anyway, I don't know why that bookmark was still there. But there's another passage in one of the other Gospels where it says, "and the workers," right? So I said that. He didn't just leave dad sitting there, but the workers. Imagine your company, wherever you work, and your boss walks in and says, "All right, guys, I'm out. It's been good." And you're just like, "What? You're leaving?" And then, the dad who's like semi-retired or retired and just comes to the office for social interaction, he walks in with a cup of coffee. "What's going on?" "They're leaving." What? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Okay? So now I'm going to get to, let's see, which one do I want to do first? It's the same story, but two different places. So let's go to Mark first. Mark chapter 3, verse 13. Mark chapter 3, verse 13. And thanks to Mike, I got all of these lovely little ribbons that I can put on all those spots. Yeah, it's pretty fancy. So Mark 3:13. Jesus went up into the mountain and called to him those whom he desired. So he's got an inner circle, which we know that. And they came to him, and he ordained 12 to be with him. Verse 14 says he ordained 12. What does your version say?
Then he appointed 12, and then called him his apostles.
Okay. We'll come back to that. To be with him. And he sent out to preach and to have authority to heal sicknesses and to cast out demons. This is who? Simon, whom he named Peter. Remember, Peter is the nickname, means Rocky. Right? James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, whom he surnamed Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus and Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. But I want you to look here. He ordained the 12. That word in the Greek, which I have in my Greek study here, is, let's see here. 40. All right, is the word poye. Poyeo. 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 Apparently, again, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I read the words, okay? Apparently, a prolonged form of an obsolete primary, so they don't use it anymore, but it was to make or do, to appoint, to confirm, to execute, to produce, to remember, to bring yield. So this word,
Powerful word, then.
yeah, it says he ordained the 12 to be with him and he sent out to preach. That word would be the same word that they would have utilized whenever they were talking about executing a contract, or if you are an executor of a will, that you are the one who makes that thing happen in life. That piece of paper has to happen, so you're the executor of the will. Or you are executing the contract. I'm the one who authorizes that this is what we're going to do. We're going to complete this task, this arrangement, this purchase, this sale, this whatever it is. And he says to them, you are my executors of this gospel. You're going to carry it out. You're going to produce it. You're going to bring in the yield. And it says, sent out to preach and to have authority to heal sicknesses and cast out demons. They have things that they are supposed to be doing. That's not an exhaustive list. We have more stuff, later. We can look at Acts, but that's really, for me, an important word. Poyeo. Poyeo. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but poyeo. So if you hear me say that, I'm not saying pollo like chicken. Okay, I'm saying poyeo. 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 And that is that the apostles were not just disciples of Jesus. They weren't just students of his. They were called to be the executors of his mission. Think about the impact. Like we talked about, the great weight and responsibility of an elder at a church or a pastor at a church. They were called by Jesus and then said, it's on you guys. It's on you. All right, last passage for the evening. We're going to go to Matthew 17.
And so just real quick, at this time, he would have went up to the mountain, called the ones he wanted to go with him, which means there were many more down there that were
Correct.
kind of following after.
Correct. They're saying that probably up to 120 people kind of following him and his group. But he kept the 12 close, and he had an inner circle even smaller than that. He had 3. And we're going to look at that right now.
Okay.
Matthew 17. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, not Andrew. Peter, James, and John, his brother, John his brother, and brought them up to a high mountain alone, and was transfigured before them. His face shone as the sun, his garments became white as the light. And suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. And then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. This is awesome. If you wish, let us make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. You can see Moses going, not the tabernacle again. Right? And while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And when the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were filled with awe. But Jesus came and touched them and said, Rise, don't be afraid. When they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And they came down the mountain. Jesus commanded them, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. And his disciples asked him, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And Jesus answered, Elijah truly does first come and will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not know him, but did to him whatever they pleased. Likewise, the Son of Man will also suffer at their hands. And then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. They're thinking of right now. Jesus, remember that movie from the 80s, Cocoon?
Yeah.
Where they had the little cocoon things in the bottom of the pool, and then like those people turned in when they're in the water, they like got filled up with this energy and all that kind of stuff. Crazy kind of weirdo movie, but that's what I think of when it says he turned to light. Like he just from the inside out just started glowing. And they were like, this is really cool. This is neat. This is really cool. We don't need to go anywhere else. I mean, we got the three of us and you, and we got Elijah and Moses here. Let's just hang out. Like we can make some tents. We can just totally do this thing. Let's camp out, man. And Jesus says, guys, chill out. The time is not right. We're not here for that. Because he said, I tell you, Elijah's already come, but the Son of Man will also suffer at their hands. And he hasn't been arrested yet. He hasn't been beaten. He hasn't been crucified. And if you look back up here in verse 9, it says, the Son of Man, tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. He's like, don't even talk about this until I'm back from the dead. Now, I don't think that they even had a full understanding as to what he kept saying. It would be like if you said 40 years ago, yeah, just don't wait. You're going to have a phone in your hand everywhere you go, and you'll just check the message immediately. Like, remember I had the K, and it's like a long cord that I can walk around the house and all that. I mean, we had no idea. It was impossible for us to connect what exactly was going on today. And so I don't think that they have a full understanding as to what's happening here until after it happens. And Jesus pretty much says as much right here. Okay? So, what I like about that is that James and John, hot-headed, a little arrogant and prideful, conceited, they feel pretty good about their status and position. Apparently, there was kind of like a friendly rivalry between the brothers and Peter and Andrew. And I see John and Peter, that whole conversation about, and they ran to see the empty tomb. And Peter ran to the tomb, but the disciple that Jesus loved, who's writing this book, John, got there before Peter did.
Well, which of the apostles was it that their mom asked if they can sit on either side of?
It was the sons of Zebedee, yes, the sons of thunder. Yeah. Where do you think that they got it from? Right? The apple didn't fall far from the tree.
Self-centered, right? Self-centered.
Yes.
That's that right there. That's all.
Yes. Yes. So my whole point of talking about James and John is we have personalities, and we let our sinfulness pervert our personalities. Jesus says, I'm okay with your personality. I'm going to deal with your sin. Be who you're going to be. He let John write in there that he was faster than Peter for all of history to see. He's like, keep your personality. I'm going to deal with your sin. And you know what? Call yourselves the sons of thunder. It's both a rebuke and it's kind of an inside joke. Keep your personality. Let me deal with your sin. That's what I see James and John. So then,
make you a robot. He wants to.
That's right. That's right. So the question for you is, how is God working in your life that you can exhibit and express yourself, your personality, but still let God deal with your sin? Some people are prone to gambling or prone to making poor choices, or they're prone to losing jobs or whatever the case is. That's their personality. But again, those things that are happening, that are those negative kind of things, a lot of times it's because of the sin as a result of their personality. So what can God work in our lives like James and John, where we can maintain our personality and our free, creative, kind of like wild spirit, whatever side of us, but help deal with our sinned side. What does that look like in your life? So that's the question for the week. See y'all next time.